Cryptocurrencies Part 3. I want to begin Part 3 by discussing the recent price history of Bitcoin, and then discuss the most important factor which will affect the future price of Bitcoin, government interference, and the favoring by government of certain Federal Reserve members and companies, and you are welcome to call that fascism or crony capitalism if you want. I have other words for it, but I'm not going to say them. What government does is vitally important to Bitcoin and must be discussed for the demon that it is. And the viewer must understand how corrupt government is and how unfair their favoritism policy is to the people who are not governed but dominated by this mafia that the Nazi regime has grown into. First, the price history. I will show you that the people want Bitcoin and possibly other cryptocurrencies, and both the price history and the existence of these vehicles proves that they want them so badly that they will pay about 140 times as much for one Bitcoin as the dollar is worth. There is only one cryptocurrency that is prized so highly, and that's Bitcoin. Most of them you can buy for pennies and much, much less. So the public isn't clamoring for many of the cryptocurrencies yet. Litecoin is around $2.50, and I don't know how fast it has appreciated over the past 6 months. It did, however, have a sharp decline around the same time that Bitcoin rose to about $255, then crashed down to $55.59 in April 2013. Litecoin was about $5 and fell to about $1.50, I think, and has come back to the halfway point, but no currency, crypto or not, has ever had the value of Bitcoin, and that's notable. The world has never seen a currency that had a value 140 times that of the US dollar. What does that tell you? Your own interpretation is better than mine, but I want you to answer this question to yourself before you proceed, and then you will be ready for the next topic, which is as follows. 6 months ago, you could buy Bitcoin for $44.87. At this moment, which is 3:08 a.m. Mountain Time, Tuesday, September 17th, 2013, the price is $139.32. Let me put those two figures into my financial calculator and see what the growth is on a compounded daily basis. I'm going to use 182 days to represent 6 months. The daily growth is an astounding 0.5%. If the bank paid you 0.5% per day, you'd be rich in no time with a deposit of just $100. And that is the history over the past 6 months of Bitcoin. It is nothing less than astounding. My calculator says the daily compounded growth is 0.62447148. Now I'm going to open a spreadsheet and use that number. Suppose your life savings, your inheritance, is an apartment building worth $300,000. You own it free and clear, and you're earning 10% or $30,000 annually on it. Expenses will use up 25% of the gross income, and if the building is more than 25 years old, it could be 35% of the building's gross income. You're lucky to net 10% because that's a 10% capitalization rate, and you don't get that in Beverly Hills, California. Try 6% cap rate. So we're talking about a building which cash flows like few apartment buildings, and the lousy return on investment is not the only bad news. You have to put up with tenants, late payments, evictions, lawsuits, and maintenance like midnight toilet repairs and maintenance companies that rob you blind on the repairs. You hear about Bitcoin, make a study of it for a year, and decide you're going for it. You sell the building and pull out $300,000 and put it all into Bitcoin in March of 2013. And for 6 months, you ride a tumultuous roller coaster as the volatile and unstable Bitcoin is bandied about by buyers and sellers who come in and take a short ride and drop out, but you hang on tightly and emerge to this day with your $300,000 still intact. In fact, your initial nest egg has actually grown. The investment grew at a little over 0.5% per day for 182 days, and today you have more than triple what was initially invested. You're happier than a pig eating a donut in a squad car. with the siren on, violating people's civil rights, beating people with a baton who came out to protest the injustice by government, and you're spraying them with pepper spray and punching women in the face and throwing them into a filthy jail cell with feces on the walls. Stop! I mean in mud. You're happier than a pig in mud is what I meant to say. The former owner could sell the bitcoins this month and buy 3 similar apartment buildings, paying cash for them, or give the bitcoins to the seller and let him enjoy the rapid appreciation from here on out, if there is one. The seller just might know about Bitcoin and be interested. Donald Trump is offering luxury units in New York, and he only accepts Bitcoin. He doesn't want the worthless fiat currency because Donald Trump is smart. By the way, you're fired. Marla Maples cleaned his clock, so that makes her even smarter. The actual growth of $300,000 invested in Bitcoin just 6 months ago, in the latter half of March 2013, grew to $931,491 by September 17th, 2013. Half a year and triple. There is no stock in the world with such a record for the same period. If this actual and real trend continues, that 300,000 will grow to 2.9 million in just 1 year after it was invested. I don't know what Bitcoin will do in the future. I have said that it depends on what your so-called government does, and I have called them Nazis and said that they are very greedy and selfish and they do unwise things. I have said that if they can't own and control something, they try to kill it. I have said that it would be very unwise to kill the cryptocurrencies because other nations will not pass up the opportunity to have this very efficient system for transporting money around the world by internet, and if America misses out, it's because of our poor leadership. We need to part with the Nazis ASAP, as soon as possible, because they do not do what's in the best interest of the people anymore. Nazis rig elections, pass laws that we the people don't approve of, and they take us into costly wars that we don't support, and they don't care what we think about it all, and this is bullshit governance, and something must be done about it. This forces us to look at that exit door marked secession as the only way out of this burning building. And the fire is not limited to the United States corporation. The same thing is happening all over the planet. The people all over the world don't want to be enslaved. And the Nazis have total slavery in mind for all of us, not just the poor. If they would limit it to just the poor, the elite might go along with it if they enjoy privilege. But the Nazis are currently betraying all those who helped them subdue the common people, and it should be very clear to every lawyer, judge, doctor, and politician that your help was appreciated, but the Nazi dictator now puts a dagger in your back, and this is your reward for helping the dirty, filthy scumbags rise to power. If you're in military, thanks a lot. You fought for your country, now look what we've got. You think you're a hero because you served the Nazis? Have you had enough? Have someone hit you with the butt of your rifle to wake you up. Let me say this to the elite. You've been had. Wake up and smell the Nazism, because you're never going to be able to enjoy your ill-gotten profits that you received from cooperating with these thieves. What did Saddam Hussein do to those who helped him rise to power? He murdered them. Not 1 or 2, but thousands of them. He put some into a shredder head first, others feet first. This was a very sick individual, and when he wore the lovely hemp-colored necktie, nobody was more pleased than I. I enjoyed watching him die. I wish I could have watched it live. It was a spectacular event. It felt like it was heaven sent. What did Mark Twain say about this kind of feeling? He said something like, "I never actually killed a man, but I have read many obituaries with great satisfaction, glee, and delight." If I could have been present when Saddam Hussein dropped, it would have been a pleasure to watch him pee his pants. And I would have enjoyed recording it just to hear his neck snap. I would play it over and over again like a popular song. By anyone's standards, what Saddam Hussein did in his life was wrong. I have only a few regrets, and one is it didn't happen soon enough, and that it couldn't happen 1,000 times, so we can all get a kick from seeing it over and over again. When the Nazis drop, I'd like to watch and bring a camera so I can enjoy it on the replay. But at the rate they are going, they aren't even close to their end. They have everything just about sewn up, and it's the common people who will drop like Saddam Hussein. So in America, the Saddam Husseins live and the innocent will die, and are dying, because the puppet president by rigged election granted himself the right to kill anyone without the constitutionally guaranteed right to due process of law. What does all this have to do with Bitcoin? You don't know? You're not an investor if you don't know. Investment is about risk assessment, and when the government is thoroughly corrupt, it affects the safety of your investment. We have a lawless government that does not have the consent of the people, and that puts a smell of revolution in the air, and I can pick up on the scent. This makes the country unstable, which is not the best environment for investment, you must understand. I foresee violence, and I'd prefer to see Bitcoin rising in use, with money flowing in to topple the central bank monopoly and the Federal Reserve parasitism. This would take America and the world in the right direction, but we are meeting fierce resistance with the government trying to seize control of Douala and Mt. Gox, claiming that drug dealers are laundering money using Bitcoin, but drug dealers are laundering money now using dollars. Why don't they close down Goldman Sachs? Because the system is rigged like the elections. Where have you been? You didn't notice? The Bitcoin crackdown has nothing to do with CIA drugs or money laundering, because Bitcoin is not the only currency in the world, and there isn't any conspicuous crackdown on dollars or euros. That's because both have a central bank in control. The crackdown on Bitcoin has to do with power and control by those at the Federal Reserve, the enemy of the people. If the Nazis have a headquarters, it's likely at the Federal Reserve. Some of you think that the Nazi regime is crumbling, and someone is going to pass out free money to you one day. This propaganda originates from the Ministry of Propaganda, in case you didn't know. The Nazis are not about to fall, even though some of the more optimistic see the Nazis dying out and Bitcoin rising to prominence. This is okay if you're a dreamer, but I think your dream is pure fantasy with no reason in the real world to believe that this is what will actually happen. More murder of the innocent is likely, and this is what dictators do to stay in power and reduce the chances of a coup d'etat. Castro murdered 10,000 per day, and I worked with some of them in 1969. Killing the intellectuals is what dictators have to do to stay in power, because nobody wants them in power. They're not good for the people. Stalin murdered 20 million intellectuals. This is how crazy the dictators are. So when you think about Bitcoin and the other cryptocurrencies, keep this in mind. America is owned by Europeans. Many are located in the Crown, a section of London like the Loop in Chicago. It's a financial district. It's also the slave center of America, an owned and controlled asset of the Crown. It wouldn't hurt to study what really happened during the so-called American Revolution, because what you get in history books is pure propaganda written with consent of King George. There's nothing new about the mentally strong dominating the mentally weak. Are we ever going to have a population of strong-minded individuals? Not with fluoride in the drinking water. Not with government in total control of the educational system. Not with government now in full control of student loans. Not with 70% of the American public on some kind of prescription drug as we have today. The only way out is secession. And that will only come about when the majority of the citizens are aware, and that depends on you. You won't make $657,000 annually with Nazis in charge, and I don't know if Bitcoin can survive. This is perhaps the most deadly threat of all, government interference in the free market, regulating you so that their boys at Goldman Sachs can make a killing without lifting a finger, getting their hands dirty, or breaking a sweat. You won't be able to arbitrage trades at Bitstamp and Mt. Gox because your so-called government won't allow you to take any business away from Goldman Sachs. We enjoy crony capitalism. And if you're not with the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Club of Rome, or Skull and Bones, then you just won't have a place at their table, the table of pigs who feast like gluttons, and tomorrow they return and do it all over again. Insane salaries for them, while you try to find a job at minimum wage. I'm very disappointed by the current system, and I see it getting much, much worse. I see that they have been organizing things for decades, and it's all in place now, so they don't care if you learn the truth about 9/11, or the Oklahoma City bombing, or the Batman Theater murders, the Boston Marathon bombing, Montauk mind control, Manchurian candidates, or Andy Perro. They figure, what can you do about it? Well, we can talk. And as more and more learn the truth, the realization sets in, and animosity for the Nazis builds. As more and more do not have enough to eat, tensions will rise, and so the DHS bought billions of hollow point bullets, which have been outlawed in war, but our so-called government doesn't care. They commit war crimes anywhere they want, and to any extent they want. Reporters can't get in to get the story. They are killed, and the story never gets into print. The press is under full control of the Nazis. So will you be able to glide right into an arbitrage position and set up automatic software to earn millions every year? I doubt it. You will be enslaved first. They will murder all the intellectuals or poison their drinking water to remain in power. And you might be wondering why there is fluoride in your drinking water. It lowers IQ, and the Nazis don't have to kill the intellectuals as Castro and Stalin did. Fluoride kills the brain cells, and the Nazis and the brainwashed tell the public that fluoride is good for the teeth, even if they don't have a single scientific study to support this wild claim. Who in the public is asking for the proof? Nobody. Americans repeat that lie that toxic industrial waste fluoride, rat poison fluoride, is good for your children, as if it was their own idea and not pure propaganda playing on your ignorance of science, and in particular, chemistry and medicine. So will the Nazis do what Saddam Hussein, Fidel Castro, and Joseph Stalin did? Or will they do what's in the best interest of the people? I'm going to bet everything I have on the Saddam Hussein, Fidel Castro, and Joseph Stalin option. And if I could bet again, I'd bet it all that the Nazis will never do what's in the best interest of the people. Now, if I'm right, then Bitcoin will have about as much luck trying to survive as the people are having nowadays, because the poor economy was planned. The Nazis took $43 trillion and handed it to their own banks. And in part 2, I indicated why they did that. As the denominator approaches infinity, the value of the currency approaches zero. And the object here is to make everyone dirt poor and force the rich to turn over their gold and silver for something to eat and some water. With 70% of us on some form of prescription drug, it's time that some of you look at the conspiracy reality if you're not mind-controlled. The Nazis perfected mind control, and it seems that you are their victim. You know little about mind control techniques, and the Nazis have a PhD in mind control. In fact, they have thousands of PhDs working for them, and they're being paid with your wages, forcefully taken from you by government. All those PhDs are traitors to their country for knowingly helping the enemy achieve their mind control goals. Someone should speak to these individuals and make them see that they are selling out their species for the salary they are paid. With the help of these PhD traitors, the Nazis are going to stay ahead of the common people because the common people are on fluoride and their brains don't work anymore. They would much rather drink beer than study Bitcoin, ponder a graph, and try to reproduce it from memory. Common people don't want to use their brains in this way because it hurts. Ask them to put all 10 of the world's top economies in order, complete with GDP figures for this year, and they probably couldn't even come up with one nation that goes on the list, and the GDP part of the graph will be blank for sure. They know every ball player on every team, but ask them why fluoride is in their drinking water, and most of them didn't even know they were being drugged with fluorine against their wishes. All citizens of the planet must have a clear idea of where they want to go. Whether you are an American sliding down the slippery slope of slavery at the hands of a government which lacks the consent of the people, is unauthorized, installed by rigged election, with a puppet without papers in the White House, or you're a foreigner whose country is dominated by the Nazis who own America and live most likely in Europe, you want to move towards fairness, equality, and in America, that means constitutional government. We don't have that in America. We have a cancerous growth that I have referred to as the Nazi regime. The Nazi regime isn't the puppet president or the cowards in Congress. They work for the Nazis, and they are part of the regime. But the core of the regime are those who don't have faces or names, but they have infinite power and can commit war crimes with impunity. They control the media and almost everyone through salaries, bribes, threats, and murder if necessary. It's the worst mafia the world has ever seen. It's more powerful than all the mafias combined. When I was a kid, we feared the Hells Angels motorcycle gang. The Nazis are the biggest and scariest motorcycle gang in the world. These guys could scare the shit out of the Hells Angels and make them cry like babies and beg for leniency. The Nazi regime is so filthy that they make the Hells Angels look like a commercial for a perfumed bubble bath. They're that dirty. They have more blood on their hands than Larry Silverstein, Dick Cheney, and Donald Rumsfeld combined. You could throw George Bush in there, but he just adulterates the purity of evil because he's so stupid. If George Bush had a brain, he might be dangerous, but we're lucky he hasn't got one. So I have an image for you, and each person on the planet must decide which direction we want to go in. On the left, we have the dirty, rotten Nazi motorcycle gang government operating behind the scenes, and on the right, we have the U.S. Constitution. Which one do you want? On the left, you have total slavery, and on the right, you have all your freedoms back. On the left, you have tyranny, crony capitalism, the TSA touching and squeezing your ass, the DHS buying bullets, fluoride in your drinking water, government educating your kids, and a worthless Congress that no longer represents you. And on the right, you have the nation's currency back into the hands of the people. The Congress is gone. States are independent of the federal union. The power has been broken up. No more costly wars, no more illegal invasions or unconstitutional occupations. And we enjoy peace and prosperity in America once again. Is the choice easy to make? I would like to see a return to the U.S. Constitution for all people of the earth. I don't like this filthy, meth-addicted motorcycle gang in Washington. And someone needs to tap Obama on the shoulder and tell him to go get Ben Bernanke and clear out. Take your sidekick Eric Holder with you, because we don't want the Attorney General running guns to Mexican drug dealers. The sheep are in control now, and it's time for all you losers to get the flock out of here. Better go before we get the rope and start the war crimes trials. You can't live in America because we want to keep America clean and drug-free. People, we are either going to dismantle the Nazi regime or they are going to dismantle the U.S. Constitution. We don't have a lot of time to think about this. Each of you is a soldier in this battle, and the enemy has mind control on their side. They control all the nuclear weapons, and they are madmen. They will use them. They will have our own military firing upon us, and they will bring in foreign troops to kill us too. Time is of the essence. Do something to inform others before it's too late. Everyone has to choose between the Nazi regime and the Constitution. If you do business with Goldman Sachs, you're aiding and abetting the enemy. If you vote in elections, you're choosing the lesser of two evils, and both candidates are Nazis. So you're not only wasting your time voting, but you're also helping Nazis stay in control. And if you don't make the conscious decision to stop supporting Nazis with your daily actions, then you will render yourself useless in this war against tyranny and oppression. When total slavery comes, it will be your fault. You in military are traitors to your country because you are working for the Nazis, serving Nazis, supporting the Nazi regime, and your brain has been taken over. Boot camp is a process of brainwashing, and you need to break out of that matrix and stop aiding and abetting the enemy. If you put money into their banks, you're supporting Nazis. Pay your electric bill in advance and leave the money with them instead. Stop supporting fractional reserve banking. When America and the world simplifies the choices to just two, the Nazi regime and the U.S. Constitution, then all activities can be sorted into two boxes. One box supports the Nazi regime, and the other supports the U.S. Constitution. Look at the things you do on a daily basis and decide if your activities help the Nazis or dismantle their evil empire. When each of us is aware that we have only two choices, dismantle their regime before they completely dismantle the Constitution, or lose to the Nazis, then it becomes a war that we can actually win. It's much like a Wild West shootout. The villain is the Nazi regime, and he's drawing his gun against the U.S. Constitution. If the Nazi draws first, the Constitution is dead. If the Constitution is supported by the people, then the Nazi goes down with a bullet through his heart or his head. The dirty, rotten Nazi bites the dust, and the people win. Bitcoin has a chance only if we can dismantle the Nazi regime. So what's the future of Bitcoin? The Nazis will try to regulate it to death. They will continue cracking down on legitimate businesses and continue their plans for world domination. And will the common people protest this? Not likely. If they have their beer and ball games, they're good. And you can't interfere in their blissful happiness. What will those who own apartment buildings do if they're smart? They will sell them and buy Bitcoin because there are no tenants, no lawsuits, no repairers, and no expenses, and the return is off the charts. It's a better return on investment than any business can provide, and that's likely to be true until Bitcoin has a few $1 trillion of capital invested in it. Will it be a roller coaster ride? Yes, providing bargains all the way and arbitrage opportunities as some panic, and you want to be part of the arbitrage team if Goldman Sachs allows it. The roller coaster will continue until capital reaches the critical mass required for stability. Recall that this currency doesn't inflate, and that's the most important point anyone can make. Bitcoin doesn't inflate. Money flows in as investment, and nobody is watering down the value by printing huge amounts of cash for their friends, the pigs at the glutton feast. The capital is divided by the number of non-inflating units, and that's the new price. As Bitcoin attracts capital, the price of Bitcoins rise, and everyone who owns them wins. The better the track record, the more money flows in. Anyone with a business will sell it and move into Bitcoin for the higher yields. They sell because there's no point in having $300,000 tied up in equipment in order to earn 10% per year. If it's a bakery, the owner doesn't have to bake anything. He can more than triple his money in 182 days, if the past is anything like the future. If the rate ever drops to 10% annually, it's still better than an apartment building that nets 10% annually because there are no tenants, no evictions, no stopped-up toilets, and no roof leaks. What would you do? If one has a choice between 10% annually and 300% in just 6 months, it's easy to pick. People say, Bitcoin has risks. Yes, and so does being in business, and it's the same risk. Poor leadership in government can ruin Bitcoin and ruin your business. This is the end of Part 3. Click on the link and go to Part 4 now, please. Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, Part 3. I want to begin Part 3 by discussing the recent price history of Bitcoin, and then discuss the most important factor which will affect the future price of Bitcoin, government interference, and the favoring by government of certain Federal Reserve members and companies, and you are welcome to call that fascism or crony capitalism if you want. I have other words for it, but I'm not going to say them. What government does is vitally important to Bitcoin and must be discussed for the demon that it is. And the viewer must understand how corrupt government is and how unfair their favoritism policy is to the people who are not governed but dominated by this mafia that the Nazi regime has grown into. First, the price history. I will show you that the people want Bitcoin and possibly other cryptocurrencies, and both the price history and the existence of these vehicles proves that they want them so badly that they will pay about 140 times as much for one Bitcoin as the dollar is worth. There is only one cryptocurrency that is prized so highly, and that's Bitcoin. Most of them you can buy for pennies and much, much less. So the public isn't clamoring for many of the cryptocurrencies yet. Litecoin is around $2.50. And I don't know how fast it has appreciated over the past 6 months. It did, however, have a sharp decline around the same time that Bitcoin rose to about $255, then crashed down to $55.59 in April 2013. Litecoin was about $5 and fell to about $1.50, I think, and has come back to the halfway point. But no currency, crypto or not, has ever had the value of Bitcoin, and that's notable. The world has never seen a currency that had a value 140 times that of the US dollar. What does that tell you? Your own interpretation is better than mine, but I want you to answer this question to yourself before you proceed, and then you will be ready for the next topic, which is as follows. 6 months ago, you could buy Bitcoin for $44.87. At this moment, which is 3:08 a.m. Mountain Time, Tuesday, September 17th, 2013, the price is $139.32. Let me put those two figures into my financial calculator and see what the growth is on a compounded daily basis. I'm going to use 182 days to represent 6 months. The daily growth is an astounding 0.5%. If the bank paid you 0.5% per day, you'd be rich in no time with a deposit of just $100. And that is the history over the past 6 months of Bitcoin. It is nothing less than astounding. My calculator says the daily compounded growth is 0.62447148. Now I'm going to open a spreadsheet and use that number. Suppose your life savings, your inheritance, is an apartment building worth $300,000. You own it free and clear, and you're earning 10% or $30,000 annually on it. Expenses will use up 25% of the gross income, and if the building is more than 25 years old, it could be 35% of the building's gross income. You're lucky to net 10% because that's a 10% capitalization rate, and you don't get that in Beverly Hills, California. Try 6% cap rate. So we're talking about a building which cash flows like few apartment buildings, and the lousy return on investment is not the only bad news. You have to put up with tenants, late payments, evictions, lawsuits,